Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, it appears that Kuro Games has come up with some crazy news regarding version 2.6, and that is, of course, going to be the introduction of a brand new weapon series, something that wasn't actually discussed at all during the live stream. I actually do genuinely wonder why, because I pre-watched a couple of these weapons, and boy oh boy, are they actually kind of exciting. They might actually be kind of good. So let's go ahead, let's get right out into it. Weapons awarded to gladiators of exceptional merit. It's an embodiment of glory and a powerful hunter's growl. Let's see what we got in store for us, ladies and gentlemen. Starting off with Feather Edge, a sword. So what this weapon is going to do is it's going to have a base stat of about 412 attack and a crit rate of 20.2% at max rank. And so if you know how base stats work in this game, basically all the weapons are going to have this. This is unfortunately on the lower end when it comes to base attacks in the game. And so what we're hoping is that, well, because they're BP weapons, they're going to have some pretty strong weapon skills to make up for the lack of stats over here. Fortunately, though, the crit rate on these weapons is relatively high, only 4% lower than the actual 5-star weapons themselves. And so just using like a bit of a brief little comparison over here, surely there's somebody with, okay, let's just look at what Emerald of Genesis looks like over here. So you can see it's only 4% lower on crit rate, but it is around 170 or so lower on the base attack. And when all of your attack scaling in the game, percentage-wise, goes off of your base attack, well, having 100 or so, 170 or so less over here can make a bit of a difference. So just keep that in mind. And that's also going to apply to all the attack buffs that you might have on your team. So we'll talk about some of the specifics of that later for some of its users. So we covered base stats. That's probably the last time we're going to be covering it for today, so just keep that in mind. Now for the weapon skill, Oath of Tide Hunters. Casting a Resonance Liberation is going to increase your attack by 7.2 up to 23%, and then also grant 10.8% to 34.5% Resonance Liberation damage bonus. So what you're going to notice over here is that these weapons scale abnormally well with synchronization ranks, because most weapons in the game from S1 all the way to S5 or R1 to R5, they usually double in terms of their effects. This would go from like 10.8 to like 21.6, but instead they're almost tripling. It's actually more than tripling for some of the stats. And so with these being like Pioneer Podcast, you know, Battle Pass weapons, getting more and more copies of them is going to take a bit of time. You can speed up that process by actually going ahead and purchasing the premium pass. And so, yeah, it's, you know, sort of pay to winny, but also like a lot of people aren't really using their Pioneer broadcast weapons anyways, because they honestly aren't that good regardless. So I think that it's kind of like an interesting trade-off over here, right? I'm personally somebody that has like 7 of these boxes just because I've been buying the battle pass like every single version, and I've never had a use case for any of these. And so the fact that these weapons are here for like the low spenders, knowing that like the actual BP ones aren't that great, I don't think it's like the hugest deal ever if these are like a little bit stronger than the existing cast, because I still don't think they're as good as the standard weapons, especially considering what some of the standard weapons actually are. So just thinking about this effect, right? It's going to give attack, it's going to give liberation. Let's think about some of its potential users. It's a sword, and you need to deal liberation damage as a sword user. And the unfortunate part about this is that there's not really a sword user on the roster that actually deals liberation damage. Havoc Rover is probably actually the closest one to that regard that actually deals liberation damage, but Havoc Rover's damage split is kind of equally portioned out across all of their damage types. And so my initial takeaway from this is that, well, this sword is not really going to have a huge number of users when it initially launches. However, we do have to think about some of the potential additions that are coming to the roster. A lot of people are speculating, right, that Chisa, the character with like sort of like the chain scissor blades, all of that, she might actually be the one that's a sword user, and she might be the one that deals liberation damage. That's pretty much the only guess that you can make right now. Maybe it's Chu Yan too, but just some stuff to think about. Their chances are these weapons might actually be for or tailored around some of the unreleased units in the game. So do keep that in mind. Unreleased, but teased. Now let's keep on moving forward. We got Aureate Zenith. Holy shit, these are kind of hard to pronounce. The broadblade. You might guess who this is for. The base stats, once again, they're going to be almost identical to what we saw before. But instead of having crit rate, it's going to be a critical damage weapon. And this is actually the first 4-star critical damage weapon we've ever seen in the history of the game. We've never actually had a 4-star critical damage weapon. And I would dare say that crit damage 4 stars are actually better than crit rate ones. Because guess what, guys? To deal critical damage, you have to critically hit first. And when you're running a crit damage 4 cost, what that means is that you're going to be able to run crit rate 4 cost. And guess how much crit rate 4 costs give? 22%, which is, you know, a little bit higher than the 20.8% or the 20.2% that you would be getting from the weapon. And so you end up with like a little bit more crit rate overall running a crit damage piece like this, or a crit damage weapon like this. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now let's read what the weapon effect is. And do remember, these scale really well with dupes. Casting your liberation increases your attack by 7.2% up to 23, and then grants you a heavy attack damage bonus. Ladies and gentlemen, it's basically confirmed by now that Augusta is a heavy attack damage dealer. You can look at the token in Wiwa. You can just look at some of the buffs that are in the TOA. She's a heavy attack damage dealer. This is designed for her, but, well, it's probably going to be Jian's best in slot. Yeah, this guy's a heavy attack damage dealer that scales off of attack, and their liberation is when they deal all of their damage. And so this is, without a doubt, going to be both Jian and Augusta's best 4-star option. That's really just what it is, especially at, probably not at R1, but especially as you get closer to R5. 23% attack and this much heavy attack damage bonus just has to be strong, right? And this is going to be great for a lot of like the low spenders who will be able to, you're probably only going to be able to get 2 copies at the start of the patch, but you can max these weapons out, assuming that you buy the premium BP within 3 updates. And, you know, obviously there's a cost associated to that, but the BP is one of the most cost efficient things you can purchase in the game. And so again, for low spenders, this is a great addition and should make the gearing process for your Augusta or your Jian a lot easier if that's the route that you want to go down. That's pretty much it. But yeah, those are the 2 intended users for this. There aren't really any other broadblade users that deal heavy attack damage. But, I mean, this is also kind of like the nice thing about these weapons. Even if you don't have this damage type necessarily on your character, you can still benefit from the attack boost. And so there is some usability, even if you're not able to like actually use the damage type effect on these weapons. But naturally, right, if you actually are able to use a damage type, they're going to be a lot better. So it'll be mid on other broadblade users, like maybe like a Lupa or a Calcharo, but it'll still have like some effect. So don't feel like you're sacrificing everything for these ones. Now we got Solar Flame, Hunter's Growl. And this is where stuff gets a little bit interesting. And this is where stuff gets a little bit theory crafty based off of what we've already seen. So, a pair of pistols that have 412 base attack and a 20.2% crit rate. And for the weapon skill, dealing basic attack or heavy attack damage is going to increase your attack by 2.2 to 7 or 2.2 to 7.2%, and then will grant you 2.2 to 7.2 heavy attack damage bonus for 7 seconds that stacks up to 4 times. So at max rank, right, 28.8% attack, 28.8% heavy attack damage bonus. I would just say at a baseline, it's like the mix of stats is like slightly different, where it's like the attack is just higher than the damage type on here. I don't think it makes that much of a difference, but what's really interesting is the damage type that this pistol is buffing. There's no heavy attack pistol users in the game. There's not a single one. no pistol user currently uses their heavy attack as their main damage type. And so, because there's clearly a trend for these weapons to be suited for users that aren't released yet, well, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to do a little bit of digging. Let me just pull up some resources right here and paint you a bit of a story for what I think this weapon, who I think this weapon is designed for, and why. So the first bit that we're going to look at over here is this. If you look at the version update page, and you look at this Sonata set, Law of Harmony, you'll see casting an Echo skill grants you a 30% heavy attack damage bonus. The pistol is the one that deals heavy attack damage. And clearly, right, Augusta, she's meant to use this one because she shields. And so, pistol user that deals heavy attack and then synergizes with Echo skills. Well, ladies and gentlemen, what's something that we saw on the 2.6 livestream? I'll tell you what we saw. The trailer at the end of the 2.5 livestream, right, was obviously super hype. We got to see some action over here from an unreleased character that's been teased.
What prey do we hunt this time?
Doesn't that mean that they have an Echo with them? So they're a pistol user. The only pistol on the new BP weapons, which are 4 new characters, is heavy attack. She works alongside an Echo, and there's a new Sonata set that buffs Echoes and buffs heavy attack. If you can connect the dots at an elementary or even preschool level, it's pretty clear right now, Law of Harmony is for Galbraina. Galbraina's a pistol user, and Galbraina also deals heavy attack damage. Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm calling right now. And believe me when I say this, I don't even think there are any leaks about any of this shit. It's pretty much just confirmed based off of all the stuff that we're seeing. So these weapons are for unreleased characters. Galbraina is an unreleased one, and Galbraina is going to use this. She deals heavy attack damage and fucks around with Echoes at the same time. So yeah, that's pretty much the only user of this. Because like I mentioned before, you look across the roster of pistol users, who do you have? Resonance skill damage, right over here. Liberation damage, over here. Who else? No damage, over here. And then basic and skill damage. And liberation damage over here. She should never use as her heavy attacks. I'm pretty sure those are the only actual fucking pistol users in the game. I don't think I missed anybody. Oh, wait. Honestly, Chakona might be able to use it too. You know what? Chakona might be able to use it, but Chakona's mostly liberation damage, so she's probably just better on Static Mist anyway for the base damage. I think Static Mist is just going to be better in most ways anyways, because of the higher base damage and most of Chakona's damage coming from her liberation. So it's like, yeah, I think it's just Galbraina. I'm going to be honest. That's my take. Ladies and gentlemen, Saint from the future over here, and so there's been a bit of speculation looking at the Korosaurus Echo that, well, it's for Galbraina, because it deals fusion damage, it gives a fusion and echo skill damage bonus as well. But when we go ahead and take a look at Law of Harmony and its available echoes on the live stream, you're going to actually find that for this set, the Korosaurus is not actually on it. You can see all the echoes over here, and the Korosaurus is not one of them. But what you'll notice is that Flaming Claw print right there actually has 12 echoes in the set. And so, kind of taking a look at this over here of what's in game, you can see there's actually only 11 pieces in game, but there's 12 on the live stream. So there's a chance that this is actually meant to be for a liberation fusion damage dealer. And so, in all honesty, maybe Flaming Claw print is actually the set that Galbraina is supposed to use, because it does look like the Korosaurus is actually on this. But once again, we don't actually know for certain, but this is just a little bit of an extra breakdown of some of the information that's come out for 2.6. So just stay tuned until the update for the final details. All right, Saint from the future, out. Now, we got Aether Strike, the gauntlets. Same exact base stats. It's also similar to the Greatsword. It has a critical damage main stat, not a crit rate one. I've already explained why I think crit damage is a little bit better. So the skill effect is going to be casting your liberation increases your attack by the same amount, and then is going to grant you a liberation damage bonus. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not really sure why this weapon exists, because is this literally not just the same exact shit as Stonard? Like, I'm thinking about Stonard right now, and I'm not sure if I can, like, see it. Like, it's almost the same thing. Legitimately, it's almost the same thing. Casting Resonance skill increases wielder's liberation damage. This scales really well too. And then casting liberation gives you an attack bonus and then a liberation damage bonus. It's like, yes, you'll use it on the same exact users that Stonard has. And Zhang Liao's the only one. However, this is the other thing. Has had a bit of a preview as well, because this is the echo skill of Mia. And that echo skill is Crown of Valor as the Sonata effect. Upon gaining a shield, increase attack and crit damage. And the resonator with this echo equipped in the main slot gains an arrow and resonance liberation damage bonus. Yuno's arrow. She's also a gauntlet user. This buffs liberation, and the weapon set that's for unreleased characters buffs liberation. So I think this is kind of like the implication going on over here, right? Yuno is probably an arrow and liberation damage dealer that will be able to use this new BP weapon, kind of like how all of the new Septimont characters use the new BP weapon. Yeah, that's pretty much the take over here. And if we're following the same logic as Galbrena, this is probably what's going on. Yeah, Yuno's gonna use Crown of Valor, do liberation damage, and this weapon will be available for her, assuming that, you don't have a better option. However, what this also means is that for Yuno, you can probably just use Stonard, and you can probably just use Zhang Liao's signature as well, if we're frankly being honest, if she is a liberation damage dealer, because, well, that's where all the stat scaling is from. So in all honesty, you might already have a weapon for Yuno in the first place. Because Zhang Liao's signature, I'm not gonna lie, I think it's one of the most pulled signatures in the game because you got the character for free. So a bunch of people just pulled his weapon. And guess what his weapon does? It gives liberation damage. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff when it comes to these weapons, but I would say this one is clearly gonna be one of the least used. I would be extremely surprised if anybody actually pulls a copy of Aether Strike, knowing that there's probably a 5-star option that you already have. And I'm gonna be honest, you also might just have a bunch of boxes like me, and you could just use Stonard as well. Because, yeah, it's kind of clear what's going on over here, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Now let's move on to the rectifier. We got Radiant Dawn. Let's give it a bit of a look. So this one is going to be, again, attack of 412, but also a crit damage main stat too. So I would say one of the only competitive reasons you could have for pulling some of these is the difference in the main stats. And so, yeah, having that crit damage on the gauntlet and the rectifier is a pretty unique thing that I think a lot of people might actually be looking for. And this one gives you this bonus. Casting a resonance skill increases attack by 9%, and then grants a 9% basic attack damage bonus for 10 seconds. That's interesting. This is really, really, really interesting because there are a couple of characters that can actually use this very, very, very well on the existing roster, right? And the main ones that I would say use this well, oh yeah, Zhang Liao's the only gauntlet user that can use he's the only one that can use the BP weapon. I forgot to mention that. He's the only one that can use the BP gauntlet weapon on the roster right now. But when it comes to the rectifier, you got Cantarella good to go, because she deals basic attack damage and casts resonant skills. You got Phoebe over here, because she technically deals a little bit of basic attack damage, which is neat. Not that much. She's mostly heavy attack, but does do a little bit of basic. You got not Frolova, because she deals resonant skill. You also got G-Jaw over here, because she also deals basic attack damage. And so this new weapon that's coming out is neat. It should actually buff some of their damage types, but there is a bit of an admission to make about it. It might not be that useful in relation to the existing BP weapons, because I'm gonna be honest here, Augment is already kind of good. Because what Augment does is it just gives you a massive buff to attack simply after casting your liberation. And so Augment is kind of more of a general use case weapon anyways, because almost everybody can just enjoy the attack buff without the specificity of having a certain damage type buffed like it is for basic attack over here. So in all honesty, Augment might just be a better option overall, because it's very hard to think of a character that's not going to be able to utilize this in some sort of way. And so yeah, I would say the only reasons to actually choose this one over Augment would have to be for the crit damage stat, or if you really, really, really want to buff a basic attack damage user. And I guess this is the take that we can have over here, based off some of the unreleased characters. A lot of people are speculating that because Chu Yan doesn't actually have a weapon in his splash art, he might be a rectifier user. And I think that might hold a fair bit of weight. And there's actually been this one post on the Wuthering Waves Reddit that I wanted to bring up, because I think that it might just hit the nail right on the head for who all of these weapons are for. So let's take a look at this thing. You got Chisha potentially using the sword, being a liberation damage dealer. Then you got, for the broadblade, that gives heavy attack. Very clearly, it's Augusta coded. The gun giving heavy attack, very clearly Galbreda coded. Gauntlets for and then people are saying the rectifier with its basic attack damage buff should be for Chuyan. Because I guess this is the thing, guys. There's no other characters left. And everybody else seems to fit a bill. The only real alterations that we could think of is swapping these two around, where maybe Chisa is the rectifier and Chuyan is the sword. But at this point, I really genuinely think this is what it has to be, with these two being the only real murky spots. But yeah, these weapons pretty much are tailored for all of the new units, and from all of the clues that we've received, right, across trailers, teasers, new echoes, and the new sets, and the stat bonuses that these echoes are providing, well, I mean, people should be able to connect the dots, right? I think it's pretty clear what's going on. And so I would say when it comes to like the overall value of these weapons, naturally, right, we talked a lot about who the existing users on the roster are. And while these weapon effects are great and the base stats are great, they arguably don't really have any best in slot users aside from like maybe 2 or 3 of them, right? Where the broadblade is undeniably great on Gion. That's confirmed, right? And then you're going to have the, the pistols that are good on nobody. And then you're going to have the gauntlets that are good on Zhang Liao. And then this rectifier over here that works on a couple of other units. So 3 out of 5 of the weapons, the rectifiers, the gauntlets, and the broadblade seem to have like some noticeable good actual users. And those would be some of the top priorities that I would say if you actually are trying to get the most use cases immediately. Stuff like the sword though and the pistol, you're going to get no use out of them in this version. Pretty much no use at all in this existing version. So do keep that in mind. These 3 over here, my top picks. These 2, wait for a different version if you do plan on picking them up, because you're not going to get a lot of synergy out of the existing roster. So yeah, that will be that. And do keep in mind, for the swords and the pistols anyways, well, you've already got a fair amount of competition. You got Static Mist, which is still good because of its base stats, and then you got Emerald of Genesis. It does seem pretty fitting, though, that the gauntlets, rectifiers, and broadblades, which are widely considered to be the worst standard weapons, do appear to be the best picks for the new Pioneer Pass. So that should be pretty nice as well. So yeah, that'll be our full coverage. Let me know what you all think. Are you going to pull these weapons, or are you going to redeem these weapons? Do you think they're too weak or too strong? Let me know below. And has Kuro fixed the 4-star problem? Peace out.